the room with no exit. Mara arrived at the apartment on a Tuesday that felt like a hinge. The landlord handed her a single tarnished key and an inked slip of tenancy. The stairwell smelled of dust and lemon oil, and the radiator in the hall hummed a tired tune. The flat was smaller than the online photos, but it had a closet the exact size she'd wanted. And for the first night, she let herself think of unfinished novels and a kitchen plant. She slept with the window cracked open, and a feeling she couldn't name just behind her ribs. She found the small square door on the third morning, behind a row of winter coats in that closet everyone forgets. It was flush with no knob, a shallow seam where wood met wood, and when she pressed her knuckles, it absorbed the sound instead of echoing it. There was no lock, no hinge exposed, just a darkness that felt deliberate. Mara sat on the closet floor with dust on her palms, half laughing and half wondering what people wrote in moving-in lists about rooms that don't want to be found. At first, the door was a curiosity, a small private thing she could pretend was a secret shelf. She drew a line of Scotch tape along the seam, watched how the paper caught a flake of paint, as if the door exhaled when opened to the light. Night arrived with ordinary noises, plumbing, a distant television, until the closet gave one soft, deliberate knock from inside the wall. A single measured tap, like someone answering counts in a dark room. Mara froze, the tape line trembling in her fingers. She tried rational explanations. The old building settles, a pipe brushed by a gust. She taped the seam more neatly and set a small tape recorder on the closet floor for the night, its red light for company. When she played it the next morning, there was only the low hiss and then a soft, blank click like someone closing a book. But between the static and the click, she thought she heard a name, her name spoken thinly, as though the room were practicing syllables it had collected from outside. Mara told no one. She told herself stories of mishearings and lonely imagination. The apartment felt like a slow conversation, huge silences punctuated by tiny, unnatural replies. The mirror in the bathroom began reflecting the inner door at odd angles, catching it behind her shoulder in reflections she hadn't expected. Sometimes the mirror showed the closet closed when she had left it open, as if the room wanted to arrange how she remembered the place. Patterns collected like lint. The room answered when she wondered aloud about things she had misplaced. Keys, a favorite mug, a memory of a conversation. Items returned to familiar places, but with small differences. An extra shoelace looped differently. A receipt dated from a week she couldn't remember. The tape stored whispers that weren't quite her voice. The mirror threw back moments that hadn't happened. Mara woke to the sensation that she had slept through someone moving through a threshold. And sometimes she found dust-narrow footprints leading into the closet and fading against the inner door. One week in, she began to dream with the room's cadence. In sleep, she stood before doorways that closed into rectangles of silence. In dreams, she knocked and heard distant laughter replaced by soft clicks. Waking, Mara sometimes found the tape recorder rewound, the button pushed gently as if by an unseen hand. She felt followed without footsteps, observed without eyes. Her colleagues joked she looked pale, and she let the joke pass, because admitting worry would insist the thing be named and summoned into a logic she didn't yet possess. Curiosity tightened into a purpose. Mara began to leave tiny offerings: a coin, a scrap of paper with hello written in an honest hand. In the morning, her paper was returned, folded differently. The coin warmed to the touch, as if another palm had held it. The mirror sometimes showed a sliver of someone moving past the apartment's corridor, but when she checked, the hallway stood empty, bulbs blinking the same tired light. The apartment seemed to be rehearsing presence, collecting gestures, but never giving the whole person back. She thought of leaving. The key in her pocket grew heavier, as if filled with sand. For all its strangeness, the apartment offered a necessary friction, an insistence that she notice. So she stayed, partly out of stubbornness, partly out of a slow desire to understand the pattern. One night, a neighbor's muffled voice called her name through the thin walls, something about a package. When Mara answered, no footsteps came to the door. Only the closet gave a polite, echoing knock in reply, like a chorus of a single actor answering for many. Curiosity had shape now. She decided to test the rule. She placed the mirror at the closet's seam so it would show anything reflected just beyond the thin wood, and left the recorder running on high. She sat on the bed and waited, heart measured, like a sentinel. Hours passed in that suspended way night has in small spaces. The bulbs hummed, the radiator sighed. Then, a soft arrangement of sounds on the recorder, careful and deliberate. A chorus of rustles like many hands opening a book in the dark. On the mirror, a dark square brightened just a hair, and the room felt suddenly full of attention. She pressed her palm to the wood and felt nothing at first, then a warmth, like another palm returning a greeting. A whisper traveled through the grain, but not in any language she recognized, only tones that asked and answered themselves. Mara spoke, aloud a question she had not practiced. "Do you want out?" The reply arrived as a reflection in the mirror. A small arrangement of things, the receipt, the coin, a name she hadn't told anyone, laid out in a pattern that felt like reading a sentence without words. It was as if the room was teaching her how it understood exits. She learned a rule without a teacher. The room returned what was given, but in a form that complicated leaving. A key left on the floor became a loop of shadow. A note asking for directions came back, folded into a shape she couldn't unfold. The recorder played segments of her own sentences, revoiced, slowed and patient, as if the room savored the syllables. The apartment taught her to read absence as a grammar. Every attempted exit reconfigured into a sentence that kept her inside the same paragraph. Neighbors noticed her oddity now. A hallway conversation paused to speculate. A package manager offered condolences for sleeplessness. Rumors made Mara small and remote. She began to dream of doors. She had not opened rooms full of people who smiled and then folded into silence. In one dream, she opened a corridor and found a mirror-lined hallway with doors on both sides that opened onto other versions of her apartment, each with slight, wrong differences. She woke with the taste of copper and the certainty that the room was less a physical thing than an insistence on being existentially correct. The nights narrowed into ritual. She began to keep a small ledger, noting times, recordings, and what the mirror offered back. One page contained nothing but a single sentence: "The door doesn't open outward." She cycled through clever attempts, prying the seam, sliding a screwdriver, calling a locksmith, only to find the inner door on the closet's back wall the exact same as before, untouched and stubbornly arranged. When the locksmith left, he muttered that the building had rooms that were stories, not spaces, and smiled in a way that suggested literal and metaphoric truth at once. The apartment's benevolence, if it had any, was a test of honesty. One rainy evening, after a week without visitors and a dozen half-formed plans to leave, Mara set the tape recorder to loop and walked into the closet. She stood before the inner door, palms to wood, and said aloud everything she couldn't bear to carry: the small betrayals, nameless regrets, the precise ways she had let herself sink into routine. The door remained mute. Then, as if receiving a ledger of confessions, the mirror reflected an unmade bed in a room she had never seen, and the recorder picked up a thin, patient voice speaking a single sentence: "We keep what you hand us." Her last attempt at ordinary leaving was both bravely simple and absurd. She left a single bag by the threshold with the key placed atop it, then walked out into the stairwell, intending to descend 2 flights and lock herself away from the building for a week. The corridor outside was the same as always: neighbors' doors, a stack of flyers. But when she returned an hour later, the bag lay where she'd left it, the key gone, and the inner door ajar by the width of a palm. For the first time, a faint light burned inside the square, though it gave away nothing but the impression of depth. Mara stood at the threshold and did not step away. She opened the inner door with a finger and the smallest of push, a human decision, not a ritual. The space beyond was not a corridor, but a shallow, echoing hallway that looked improbably like the building's landing, but washed of dust, and with bulbs that burned a steady, unnatural clarity. The hallway contained a single mirror at its end, and a door opposite it that led into a room that, at first glance, was the exact layout of her apartment, but cleaner, younger, arranged with a hope she couldn't remember having. In that instant, the dread and the ache braided into something else: possibility and loss in equal measure. She stepped in. The air felt slightly colder, not hostile, but honest. The room there kept its silence too, but it held objects arranged as if someone had been leaving traces for her: her favorite mug, a jacket she had discarded months ago, a folded page of a story she'd once abandoned. There was no presence, only the feeling of being observed by a bookkeeping intelligence. When she reached for the mug, the mirror at the hallway's end reflected not her hand, but an empty closet with the inner door shut, and the tape recorder she had left running on her floor click-stopped in a voice that said, without malice, "We gather endings, we return them arranged." She understood the terrible kindness. The room did not want to consume her, but to catalog endings so that they might be read later, sorted, and sometimes returned less burdensome. It had been practicing at rearranging exits for years, learning the difference between a door that led outward and a door that led inward. The choice revealed itself like an old ache: stay, and trade a jumble of memories for precision, or leave and carry the messy weight of life unedited. Mara closed the door behind her and found the apartment on the other side exactly as she'd left it. But a small square of her life had been taken for study. She lived with the knowledge like a secret profession. Sometimes the room gave back shapes that helped, a tidy memory that showed her kindness she'd forgotten, a rearranged regret that let her sleep. Sometimes it returned nothing but silent proof that exits can be organized without opening. Neighbors stopped commenting. Months passed, and the ledger filled with small, dignified miracles and maddening puzzles. The last entry read, "If a door shows you what you forgot to own, it is both mercy and theft." Mara left the tarnished key on the nail and hung a coat in the closet, as if to invite the room to practice on someone else. And for nights after, she slept a hair easier.